Have you ever been in a situation, or you probably haven't, where you might have a neighbour or someone in an environment that you've lived in or currently living in where noise is a problem? And some people's sensitivity to movement in and around them in maybe a flatting situation or an apartment building, let's just say specifically an apartment building. And, most structures, there are a lot of structures that are very wooden, and then there are other structures that are concrete, predominantly concrete, but still the interior of the buildings, at least the flooring and the ceilings, are still really sensitive to picking up different noises. And I'm wondering if you've ever been in a situation where it's been very difficult to, if you're a person over-experiencing noise, or whether you're a person that's at the receiving end or receiving an accusation, then I just want to welcome you to the Talking Blog. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Siana Raymond, and this is the Talking Blog of the Cosmic Wahine Guide to Living in Tāmaki Makoto's CBD. This is not quite a podcast, but it is kind of a one-person kōrero, one person ambling down some kind of progressive or not so progressive pathway of puzzling their way through life things. I don't want to say life hack. I really like human hack. And I want the chance to explore the different things that arise for me living in this biggest city in our country, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as well as to explore issues that is sort of outside of that, or still to do with Tāmaki Makoto, but certainly to do with Wahine Māori, who sort of have some wisdom or some sight or feeling about how to navigate things that at the outset might not be the way in which you sort of look at it from a homogenized perspective. So I wanted to take this opportunity to start this very first blog with an issue of noise complaints that's come up in the apartment building that I'm living in. So I won't mention any names, but I'll tell you noise complaints, and I have had them. I've lived with them everywhere. Who doesn't? Growing up, I grew up in a household with much older siblings than myself, and noise was a constant. And of course, it was a noisy neighbourhood. It was a really different time. The first thing that comes to my mind is that I do remember, oddly enough, like the lights would be on in our house because Mum would have worked all day, and she'd come home, she'd have some dinner, have a chillax, and she'd be cleaning and washing clothes and hanging them out on the line at like between 10 and 1 a.m. And I suppose, that's an urban neighbourhood in a cul-de-sac, and it's quite, I suppose normal for, mums at that era, and we're talking like the 1960s and 70s, where it was a different world that we lived in, where it was common. I don't think I even noticed. I think, lots of people were still awake in our neighbourhood. Around 10 p.m, at least lights would still be on in houses. And I knew it was common for mums to be hanging clothes out on washing lines at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, because when was Mum going to do it? She basically worked. I remember there was one long period of time where she worked 7 days a week. So it was a different time with noise, because I'm thinking back to what it was like growing up in suburban Auckland in Panmure in a house, and I'm thinking about what it's like for me in an apartment building, and Tāmaki Makaurau CBD is really international. It's predominantly international. And where I live is very international because you've got a lot of English language schools around where I live. And the culture is very different. So it just means if I go out to, further out towards east or even south or even west, and you're walking through a shopping, the shopping complex is a shopping mall, you do meet more Kiwi, more Aotearoa New Zealand. And so here, the idea of noise in an apartment building or noise from your neighbours is often, it's acceptable, or it's just people can turn away from it and say, oh, I don't want to listen to it, whether that's, couples arguing or, for example, when I moved in here, there was a heck of a lot of like literal loud screaming, and it was a mother who was very stressed out, and she was spent a lot of time yelling at somebody on the phone in an Asian language that I couldn't understand, but I could tell she was very upset. And she was also spent a lot of time yelling at her daughters. But a lot of that behaviour was mentioned, I believe, to the building manager, but not a lot of it was taken any further. So I think a lot of the other international people living on our floor wouldn't really take the next step to take it further unless, it got really drastic. And so fast forward to 2025, I'm currently in this situation where I'm hearing that other clients and tenants are moving out because of a person or persons making specific types of noise, and that's been like lifting weights and dropping weights on the floor, and thumping noises either on ceilings or walls. And there's been one particular really odd type of behaviour where a person has been tapping hourly through the night all the way into the early hours of the morning. And it sounds very much like that is a psychological type of noise to really create something very unpleasant, or create a really unpleasant living environment for different people so that they will eventually move out. And that's been happening. And all this has really only come to light to me this month. But I've been aware of a complaint made towards me and one of the other tenants, or my neighbour really, that we've been making a lot of these noises. And in retaliation, the person who's made those complaints will thump on their ceiling at us at different times, and they've created this really finely tuned campaign of harassment that's done in such a way that I don't know, it's sort of when you're in your maturity and you've lived in different situations and you kind of have some knowledge of humans and life, you know when a thump or a knock is just something that's random, but you also know when a thump and a knock is something very deliberate. And this person who's been doing this made a complaint last year about me, or those of us above them, and the building manager set about rectifying that, and they laid out notices everywhere to make sure that everyone was playing fair, everyone was being considerate and kind and aware and motivated to take right action and mitigate any noise that they could possibly be making that was disturbing, that could be disturbing to their neighbours. And the floors where I live, like the building is concrete, but the floors where I live especially are really, really sensitive, so much so that even if you drag a chair across the floor, it can be heard by the apartment below. And I found that really fascinating, because the last place that I lived at had a wooden building, and oh my word, you could hear people on all levels walking on their floors, in their rooms and their kitchen areas, everywhere. So when I moved in here a couple of years ago, I thought, at last, I'm living in a place that's solid, it's concrete. There's you can actually walk on your floor and you're not going to worry and disturb anybody else around you. But that's not accurate. And I think we pretty much find that situation in a lot of apartment buildings. The difference with this one, though, which I think is different to maybe the bigger apartment buildings down on Nelson Street, because you look at those and that's intense living. Like, those are people really, really living very tight and packed in very tight. And I would pretty much say you would pretty much hear so much living noise from each other. But I don't get to hear a lot of living noise where I am. However, this person who is living below us is hearing a lot more noise than they believe is fair to them. And they are incredibly sensitive to every type of noise, but in particular the accusation, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, is of weights being dropped. But it's not, a weight being dropped. It's actual workout weights, I believe, like workout weights are being dropped on the floor and then picked up and dropped on the floor. And I think, how heavy would the weights have to be? Because that noise apparently is being heard by a lot of other tenants in a lot of different parts of the building. Well, at least, the middle parts of this building. I'm thinking that set of weights, surely that would have to be like almost a barbell, or what, 40 to 60 kgs of weights? I mean, if I had a set, just thinking, and it's a good question to ask myself and to think about, is that if you had a set of 4 kg weights, that would be like 8 kgs, and you drop them, it's fair to say that just the person below would hear that. But the messages that have come out from the authority of the buildings, like the building manager and landlords, is that these dropped weights can be heard by a number of people on 4 different levels. Thinking, wow, that's really amazing. But I do hear them too, but they're coming from above. And so the people below, or at least the person below us has, they have set out on this campaign of harassment to myself and one of my other neighbours, and they oscillate between the both of us a lot on who is actually making the noise or who isn't. And I can tell you, it's unpleasant to be in the line of fire when it comes to building managers taking actions to mitigate complaints of noise, because ours really set out very, very tight and firm and did months of campaigning, really letter drops, I suppose you could call them, at our apartment doors, so much so that I still feel really a little bit traumatized. Like, I'm frightened when I open up the door, there's going to be a note out there saying, you made a lot of noise last night. So what I did to take action last year, because it was so intense, it was so utterly intense, was that I bought a whole lot of really awesome mats, quite large ones, and I've put them all over my floor, and I've put my dining table and my dining chair on those mats. So there's no way that even as I pull the chair in, it's not scraping across any floor. And when I'm walking around in the apartment, I'm walking on the mats. I'm not walking on the actual floor. So I'm also really careful about staying up. Like I close my kitchen early at about 6 o'clock, and I usually have my dinner cooked by 4 p.m. and I've eaten my dinner. And the weekend I try to have a lot more of a relaxed process. But during the week I'm quite firm with how I make sure that I'm not making any more noise after 7 p.m. And in fact, I'm kind of like up off the floor on the, watching television and for a little while. And then I'm kind of trying to get to sleep at a reasonable hour, but I'm making sure that I'm not a part of any other activities that go beyond 7 p.m. And I know how that sounds. It's really restrictive. But this last year, where this person has really set out to, I don't know. I mean, I understand what it means to, when you've got somebody in your environment that you feel is out of control. They're making a lot of noise. They're doing shit that is not helpful. It's kind of all that and so much more. And, we've all been that person who's made too much noise and that person who's experienced too much noise, or we've been somebody that's had to mediate between two groups of people about noise. We've all lived in flats where is that one flatmate, there's just that one flatmate. And we've probably been that flatmate too. It's like that flatmate that leaves all the hair clogged up in the drain. And once they've done that, you kind of are watching that drain all the time. It's, you probably think, we all think, oh, get a life. There's more to life than watching hair clogged up in a drain. And there's more to life than being stuck in a living situation where you are really, really, really oversensitive to noise. And what myself and my neighbours have struggled with is that, one, you get a notice at your door from the building manager, and you do your best to rectify that complaint and prove that you aren't doing that behaviour. And you have to keep proving, and time just goes by, and you think, you get to a point where you think, is it really becoming worth it, me continuing to live here whilst, there is that. But where I live is so, the bargain of living here is that it's so convenient. It's really, really convenient. And to a greater and lesser degree, it is very safe. But this situation with this person who's made continuous complaints of noise and their campaign of harassment has made living here really icky. And it's made it really icky because this person has they're upped the ante. They've upped the ante because what they've been doing regularly, so they made their complaint last year. The building managers really went forward on that complaint, trusting it, putting out to have the noise stop. The building managers really supported this person 150%. And we felt the force of that support. Okay, so we all said, no, we're not. And then in our own ways, we double checked ourselves and made, like me, did our best to mitigate it. I actually got rid of a whole lot of really, really heavy furniture that wasn't mine anyway, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have furniture that was making loud thumps. My washing machine is really 100% secure. And, I've got furniture that's light to move. It doesn't make any scraping noises on the floors. The apartment is like laser quiet focused. And so this individual, what they would do is thump on the ceiling. And you know that it's a thump on the ceiling with some form of wooden stick. And I could feel the vibration. And the nature of it was, over this past year, because I've come to know the nature of it over a year, is that it sounds very much like a pissed off person. Like somebody who's like, fuck yous up there, I'm down here, thump, thump. And they would do this thumping at a time in the day, usually at the end of the day, as though they're exhausted listening to you or something. I'm exhausted listening to you. I'm going to give you put you in your place, or give you a good thump. And then they would do that late at night, maybe 11 p.m. And then they would do it. They would do it again, especially in the weekends, at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and Sunday. And it's usually two good, hard, solid, thump, thump, really solid, and it'll echo through the apartment. But the thumps are actually directed at my neighbour across the hallway, so they get the real brunt of it, and I get the echo. But it is enough that the both of us are disturbed by it. But here's the thing. Other people are hearing those thumps as well, which is really, I don't know how that's possible, because it's coming from just them directly below us. Anyway, it's been very hard to prove that, because it's a waste of my time trying to tell that to the building manager, because I'm sure they've got an inkling that they know who it is. These guys, come on, they're experienced. They've been doing this work for just the longest time, right? And I've given up making complaints about that thumping noise. I think I did last year, but because the support was 150% towards the person below us, and I know that it's them doing the thumping, I didn't want to go there, because I would have sounded like a nurny, squealing on the person, sounded like I was retaliating. But the method of his thumping and the direction of it was very much him, sounded very much like he was retaliating towards us for his complaints not being dealt with satisfactorily or to his satisfaction. And I'm not sure what he was expecting. Was the thumps just a continuous warning to let us know not to step out of line? So maybe, the weights dropping and so forth, which was actually happening on floors above us, has stopped, and he wants to keep signalling the thumps to just keep warning us, you better stay in place, or you better stay in line, and don't step out of line once, because I'm down here. That's what the thumping sounds like. Well, I've been talking about this round and round. What I wanted to really tell you is that the progress is as follows, okay? So in May, I go into my bathroom, and it's because I'm getting up for, late night pee, and I can hear this music. And I'm thinking, oh, what's that? And I can't actually make out the words that's been sung, but I can hear the music. You can hear melodies being played. And that would go on all night, but it was only coming from my bathroom. So at first I thought, oh, must be a new person moved in, must be a gamer, because I'd never heard the noise before. Funnily enough, it took place coincidentally at the time that our head or lead building manager went on vacation, and they were away for 5 weeks. And this music played on and on and on and on, like it just went 24/7. And then there was a day in June where I just happened to see one of the other building managers who was here whilst our proper building manager was away. And I noticed him talking to my neighbour, because I'm a bit nosy that way. I was peeping out the peephole. Yes, I was. And I saw that they were kind of going in and out of her bathroom. And I thought, I wonder if it's to do with the noise that I'm hearing. Because, sure, it only was in the bathroom. And when I closed the bathroom door, you couldn't hear it anymore. But it was still annoying. And anyway, I thought it must be. So I then attempted to talk to that secondary building manager to say I was experiencing the same thing. And the guy just happened to say I was gossiping, so I just gave up. I just felt defeated, and I thought, I'm not saying anything more. Anyway, time goes by, and our head building manager returns from holiday, and our the neighbour across from me, she addresses it with him, and lo and behold, lo and behold, I love that. Listen to me. Oh my God, do I sound too... Anyway, what the damn? Shall I make this, anyway, sorry, I'm going off track. So anyway, here's the thing. The guy had planted a radio in the sewer pipe, in the sewer drain, or even in the extractor fan. I think it might have been in the extractor fan. But the noise could be heard everywhere, but predominantly in her bathroom. But I also think that it could be heard in the bathroom next door to her, because I often would see one of the neighbours standing out in the hallway, because I could tell he was trying to pick up where the sound of the music was coming from. But the issue we face is that most of the time, a lot of tenants won't make a stir or a complaint about it, and you don't blame them, because hey, they've got a life. They're onward. They're living, and we all put up with noises here and there. It's just part of living in an apartment building. You put up with noises and you just carry on. But the nature of this harassment coming from this guy is not noise. It's really premeditated thumping, and it's directed thumping at us, But he had planted a radio in his own bathroom, and he played it 24/7, and he could then dictate the volume, so he could turn it up or turn it down, depending on, at his leisure. And I found this out yesterday. And it's only because a lot of complaints have been made about noise. And as I said, some of the tenants moving out. But this is the first chance that I'd actually had to talk to my neighbour about this situation. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked, aghast that all this time, this was a real premeditated action. I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe, but at the same time I was like, yes, this is the first solid piece of evidence, at least for us to provide to the property manager, the landlords, and to the the building manager knows about it, because he then further investigated and found out that the guy who was doing it said that he did it because he believed she was making the thumping. And oh my word, it staggered me. So what I've done, here's what I did. Immediately I emailed the landlord and told them what had happened, told him what action I wanted to take. Then I emailed the building manager to tell them how distressed I am about hearing this, because I then went and spoke to the building manager, and he probably thinks I'm a two-faced because I was talking to him, and then on the one hand I'm kind of implicating him at neglecting us, but I then emailed the body corporate and then put in a police complaint. At this point, I'm really wanting to take some action on this while it's hot. How they say, strike while the iron is hot, I suppose. And it's the first chance, real opportunity that we'll have to bring an end to this person's campaign of harassment for revenge against us, for unfounded, untrue claims and accusations. And it's hard to keep living in a place where you're under constant accusation and suspicion of creating a miserable life for somebody else when you're not, when you know that you're not doing that. And, we live in the city life. It's so different. I just couldn't help but reflect back to all the noise we used to make in our home, but more in our neighbourhood, but more, early hours of the morning, and Mum would be cleaning and the family was up at 4 a.m. and cooking and lights are on and people are talking, and it's really living, it's real, it's life and living. And I've noticed that since the complaints started, I've decreased my living. I've gotten quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter until I literally feel like I'm folding myself inward. And I was talking to my landlord and saying, yeah, I really love living here, but I just today thought I'm not really loving living here, but I'm compromising because it's so convenient to live where I am. It's also in the CBD, I only really have to deal with just kind of discrimination because the nature of the CBD is very international, and I'm kind of not dealing with other forces and pressures of a wahine Māori if I was to live elsewhere. And that's a blog for another time, which I'm happy to share with you. But when you have access to so much more resources easily, there's transport, there's food, clothing probably not so much, food. The prices here are the same. Honestly, the prices for food are the same everywhere, except, I think if you're in the more suburban areas, you get a chance to shop at the flea markets and there's more options of grocery stores. There are some really good Chinese markets in the CBD because they do cater for the international and South Asian and Asian population that live in the CBD. So there's a lot of that good stuff too. But there's not a lot of Māori kai or New Zealand kai really. I mean, there's Mickey D's, but if you want to get good cheese rolls, you do have to go to you got to go to Te Waiponamu to get those fantastic cheese rolls. But if you're looking for things like boil up or anything else, you've got to pull up your big pants and go out there and get it. But there are a lot of good reasons for living here. There's pros and cons, but that whole issue around the noise has meant that I do notice that I've retreated. And the other thing that I noticed is that my neighbour, who also is dealing with these accusations towards her, she's very, very quiet when with her coming and going from her apartment, and I've started to get very quiet as well. I notice that I'm quiet, really quiet, opening the door, really quiet, closing the door. But the other neighbours around me still have the same behaviour. They are still, they're still open the door, let the door close by itself. My other neighbour's not so self-conscious, not so much as myself and my other neighbour is the other person who's involved in this very streamlined focus from this individual that lives below us. So where to from here? Well, I've done these complaints today. I fired them all off today. Said day, the 19th of July 2025, I did all those emails very, very clearly, and I believe that when I do get responses, my main response will be that since these complaints have come up and the noise, the thumping, that kind of, how can I put it? For me, I addressed it with a corporate body and with a landlord as control, that this person was really punishing us and making sure to control our behaviour. So they're thumping regularly, inconsistently, but regularly, to let us know that they are listening to us and they can hear us, and also to keep us in line. And they know our demographic, they know our gender. This person knows that we're females, they know our employment, they know that we're, living up here on our own. And now you do. But I'm not, you do. But I just thought, the more acts this person does, the more information is shared with them to alleviate, and it's all done in good faith, to alleviate their concerns that the people that live above them are reasonable and responsible individuals. But it just means that, and personal safety wise, when you get into the lift, like for example, I got into the lift a number of times where somebody had pushed this level below me, and I've looked at them, I've looked at the person, and I've thought, is that them? Is that the person? And they can see, they're looking at, and I'm thinking, are they looking and seeing that I'm on the level above them? And I'm nervous, and we all share the facilities, the rubbish room, etc., all the things that you do in an apartment building. And I go into some of those spaces and I think, is that the person that lives above me? It's very strange. I've noticed that I've changed my behaviour, and I'm sad to see myself become this more quieter, more compliant, this person who's not living fully and in the same way that my neighbour next to me is, or the neighbours or the other neighbours around me. And they have visitors, she has visitors. I would dare not have a visitor. I mean, he'd be thumping on the ceiling at us, and that would make me feel very, very uncomfortable, and I would report it. They may go down to talk to him, but he could deny it, and he is denying it. But now that we know he planted the radio, there's no way that he can deny that he is maybe not only the cause of the problem, but a part of the problem too. Like it sounds like he has heard weights being dropped and he's taken action, and then he's just gone to a place with it where he maybe has become quite unwell by it. I just thought, somebody planting a radio to do that, and the next thing that he might do is plant listening devices. So I went there with the landlord and the corporate body that I was concerned that he knew so much about us, more than I feel comfortable with, and that he also, now that he's been caught out with the music playing, the radio planted in his bathroom, that he'll move to the next will be listening devices, which he could just clearly put through the bathroom, because he knows now that that's a space that is more accessible for him to listen to, or even, I don't know, I'm making it really complicated, aren't I? But what do I do now? Well, I just sit and wait to see what comes back to me. I may get replies from all of them that might not make me feel very comfortable. The important thing is that I've made a note, that I've actually decided to step out of line and take some what I feel is reasonable actions, and they may, they may or may not glean me happy replies, but I've taken a first step forward in really freeing myself of the yoke that this person below me has really put onto me and my neighbour across the hall, because they're saying, basically, the authorities in the building are saying that the noises are coming from her side. Oh, excuse me, that was myself. Don't worry, you hear that noise all the time. But they're saying that the noises are coming from the opposite side of the building, and yet all of us can hear the weights being dropped, or could. That's not happening anymore. That one stopped. But because there's a lot of noises. There's just so many different noises that are being complained about. But there is one particular noise that really stood out for me as just really very sinister. And that is that there is a person who is tapping regularly, hourly, throughout the night. Just tapping. Tap, tap. And they would do it for, who knows, however long, and then stop, but enough to create a disturbance of other people who have their heads on the pillow. And this is how it works. Your head's on the pillow and you can hear the tapping noises. That's a noise that I can't hear. I don't know about that one. But it sounds that would be really distressing and very deep. And stay tuned for, the outcomes. I'd love to say that I'm going to do this talking blog regularly, and because of this particular incident, I think, what do you think, weekly? Do you think it's fair to do a talking blog weekly, or would it be done fortnightly? Yeah, I think weekly is fair, once a week. It's 41 minutes of talking, so let's leave it at that, because you've done 41 minutes of listening, coming up to 42. Until next week, then, I'm signing off. This is Siana Raymond, attempting the talking blog of the Cosmic Wahine Guide to Living in Tāmaki Makaurau CBD. Be well. I hope all the noises you hear in your life are gentle and uplifting to you, acknowledging and approving of you in ways that go far beyond anything that I could know, but you would know. Ka kite anō.